Good morning, everybody. My name is Cathal McGloin. As you can tell from my accent, I'm Irish. I think Max purposely only invited the Irish executives in red hat so that he feel we could connect to the audience. I'm probably distantly related to about half of you. But more importantly, Ireland are playing Australia in just over 3 weeks' time in Dublin. So I think the last time we played, who won again? Okay, we'll move on from that. So this morning, I want to talk to you about building an architecture for continuous innovation, and the background is all about digital transformation. And what I'm going to introduce is some of our technology, our stacks, and talk about how we can help you and what it means and why this is so important. So Joe referred to it in his presentation. He said a few years ago somebody said technology was dead. It was actually a Harvard professor who wrote a paper, and this was to post the first .com boom, right? And he wrote a paper that essentially said, you know, IT is so ubiquitous. We have mastered IT. It is so cheap that it's everywhere and everybody has access to it. And therefore, IT is no longer a differentiator. Everybody has it, and so if everybody has access to the same CRM systems and ERP systems, how do you get competitive advantage? And his whole article was about that it becomes infrastructure. And he says infrastructure raises everybody's boat, but you can't get competitive differentiation. And that was in 2003. But of course, we all know that there's a new role for IT, and that things have changed dramatically, and that Harvard professor was wrong, because IT has come into its own again. And you look today, and it's about every organization trying to figure out how they can get a competitive edge, understanding that one of the only ways they can get a competitive edge is through IT and technology. And whether you're a financial services company, or whether you're an industrial engineering company like GE, who make engines and power stations, and now they see the value in the data that comes off those engines in helping to become proactive about maybe preventative maintenance and things like that. Or whether you're a car company like a Ford or a Volvo, which not just focused on making cars anymore, they're focused on the user interface and the digital interface and becoming true mobile within the car. So this is what it's all about, or it's about startups sort of disrupting old industries. But we do know for all of us in this room, it's a great time to be in technology because it's all ahead of us. And it's happening all over the world. This is not just a North American phenomenon. It's happening everywhere that we see. This survey was actually a global survey that was conducted. And what's interesting about it is that it's business is driving it. Business is turning to IT and saying, can you help me? We want to change. We want to use technologies to change. So no longer is it IT is the poor cousin in the corner with shrinking budgets. It's CEOs coming and saying, how can we create digital assets and obtain differentiation in the marketplace? So that's what's good about it, is that it's been driven by the business. And I think the role for CIOs and for IT departments is to become the digital champion. There's a great opportunity to be the ones who say, we will tell you, Mr. CEO and Mr. Business or Miss Business, we'll tell you what technology can do. Here is the latest trends. Here's what's happening. Here's how you apply technology. And that's the exciting part of it. Now, at its heart, digital transformation is about disruption. But it's about a continuous disruption. Somebody disrupts by inventing something, by creating something new. And it may not be a different product. It may be the same product, but I take the value chain and I create something new about the value chain, how a customer finds it, how a customer pays for it, how a customer gets support, right? So it's creating a digital asset by disrupting something. And then, as we know, if it's useful to customers, they'll embrace it. And if they embrace it, the business will adapt and all the competitors will adapt. And so we go round and round again. And the reason we talk about building an architecture for continuous innovation is because this is an ongoing thing. This is not a once-off thing. It's going to continue and continue and get faster and faster. Now, a lot of it I believe, has to do with some of the technologies that are driving this. So a lot of it has to do with the emergence of mobile and the features in that device, which allowed us to say, hey, I could create a new service based upon the fact that there's a GPS location in this device. Or some of it has to do with social media, where we're changing how we learn, how we share. And clever people are saying, hey, I could use this social media stuff to create a brand new way of getting my message out, getting learning out, or sharing. So it's mobile, social, big data, and cloud. These are the 4 things that are driving it. And it's innovation around finding new ways of creating digital assets within the organization that help create that competitive advantage. And that's the role, I think, of IT. It's the opportunity to be the ones who say, hey, we can apply social media in this way to our company, create value through the creation of a digital asset. So if you think about it, digital transformation is forcing fundamental change on IT departments in terms of how they build software, how they develop it, how they integrate it, how they connect data, how they go about doing it in the first place, where it runs. So it's changing everything about it. And to evolve, IT will have to change. They'll have to change the architecture, how they build it, what the tools that they use, where they run these things, if they're going to survive and if they're not going to get disrupted. And these pressures are just one of the pressures that organizations face. They face, at the bottom, they face a pressure to modernize their existing application development and infrastructure. They want to try and, as Joe said, squeeze more out of the budget so that they can do this digital transformation. And so very often they're under pressure just to do that alone. And they're under pressure from people coming in from a completely different industry to digitally disrupt them. And they also may have their own changes or specific industry pressures from regulatory changes, or, as is happening in telecommunications at the moment, a fundamental change in the infrastructure that telecom networks are built on. Or in retail, a bricks and mortar retailer trying to compete with the online retailer. So they all have their own pressures. So they're really, really struggling to try and manage all of these and do it within a budget. Now, what's interesting about all of these industries is the emergence of the application as key to all of it. The app has become the king. So whether you're a government that's trying to get closer to its citizens and share information under pressure to share all this information, or whether you're a telecommunications company trying to invent the next service so that you don't get outmaneuvered by the over-the-top guys like WhatsApp, or whether you're a bricks-and-mortar retailer who's trying to compete with online companies who have a significant cost advantage, or a finance company like Macquarie just talked about, where they're not worried about other banks, they're worried about the next app and who else is going to get into the payments industry. So the key to this is the app is becoming very important, because that's how we're moving from what we used to call systems of record, those back-end databases and ERP systems and CRM, and we're moving towards a focus on the system of engagement, the front-end system. So the application development becomes key. It becomes central to how you look and how you expose yourself to your customers as a digitally transformed company. And those apps themselves are different. They're no longer what we used to think of as web apps. They're now on these mobile devices. They are enriched by the features of these devices. We used to be tethered behind the network, behind the firewall. That cord has been cut, and we're never going back. Mobile shipments vastly outpace desktop shipments. Desktop shipments, I think, peaked in something like 2012. So we're always going to be living in a mobile world. And that means new challenges for IT department. It means new challenges for the architectures that we think about. New challenges for the concept that people are always going to be mobile and want access to that information 24/7 from everywhere. So these are all the pressures. So to be successful, IT has to evolve from where they are today to try and deal with all of these challenges. Right? Many companies are trying to get there, but they may be stuck because these are difficult things to try and balance with all of these things. It's a change of mindset. It's a complete change of mindset around speed and agility. It's a change in culture in the IT department around keep it running, don't touch it once it is running. It'll be running for 10 years. We'll do once a year updates. It's a change in culture to it has to change all the time. It's a change in the processes that we use to run our IT departments that have maybe become embedded in our culture. We've got to change all those and think about continuous updating, continuous deployment. And it's changing technologies. So there's a lot of changes to think about and a lot of things that IT has to do to evolve. But they have to evolve sensibly because unlike the aforementioned Airbnbs and Ubers and so on, they didn't have customers to worry about. They didn't have existing platforms and technologies. They could do it from a greenfield site. Most of our customers and most of your customers, they have existing systems and customers to think about. So you have to evolve sensibly. And Gartner talk about how you have to get the balance between renovating the core, or modernizing IT as we call it, and building capability around this new digital dimension. IDC talk about it as well. They talk about their third platform technologies. And in one of their surveys, they talk about how 90% of companies will operate in a bimodal way on a hybrid fabric, but using common tools and technologies. So we're talking about sensible evolution here. We're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as my mother used to say in Ireland. So you've got to evolve sensibly. Now, in Red Hat, we think there are 3 core requirements to be able to evolve. There's the architectures, there's the processes, and there's the platforms. And those 3 are interlinked. Applications that you built 10 years ago that were meant to run on a silo and meant to run for 20 years, they're no longer, they have to change. They're no longer going to be able to run, you're no longer going to be able to run new applications on that old platforms. You have to think about getting faster and change. Stability used to be the key, now it's agility, right? So it's about optimizing platforms. Sure, you can optimize your platform. You can squeeze a little bit more out of your existing systems to try and free up some resources. You can maybe do your next app in AWS or in Azure, but is that really going to be enough? Because if you're only thinking about that next app or the one after, chances are you're going to build silos, and that's just going to exacerbate the problem. And you're going to end up with 2 different environments, one for the old, one for the new, and silos of each. So it's more than that. It's about moving from the old to the new, from an architecture moving from monolithic architectures into new microservices and API-based architectures. It's about the process of how you get there, moving from the old waterfall method to embracing agile and DevOps as processes. And it's moving from where does it all run, on-premise in my data center, to in the cloud, running on containers, running on mobile devices. These are the things, and these are why these 3 things are all interconnected. So let's look at architecture first. As we said, monolithic architectures worked well in the past when apps didn't have to change very much, right? But going forward, they're going to have to change, right? It's about constant innovation, as we just saw. It's about partners and competitors and others constantly changing and disrupting that we have to react to. So change is the only thing that's constant now, is that we have to continue to change. And so we're talking about things like microservices. The adoption of microservices, which microservices are autonomous, self-contained pieces of software, right? So it's by building using microservices, we don't have to change the monolith all the time. We can change just that one sort of microservice, just that one thing. So we break down the software into its component parts as individual services, autonomous services, and therefore then we can change and modify things in those services as we go along. So it really does facilitate sort of change and agility. Now that we have lots of microservices, they all need to talk to each other. So we see the emergence of the API-centric architectures, right? I talk about, for the Game of Thrones fans, how REST APIs are coin of the realm, right? It's how things talk to each other, how information is exchanged, how applications talk to each other. And we're going to have to think in terms of the architecture of being user-centric. Because some of those old legacy systems, they were never meant to be accessed by 2 million customers directly. And that's what sort of mobile has given us, or mobile apps, is the ability to allow the customers to connect directly to some of those. So we're going to have to think in terms of architectures that are going to support millions and millions of customers and partners and users connecting to them. This is the way to think about it. We're changing from, on the business side, taking medium to long-term planning cycles, bedding that down and locking it in. We're changing from that to more agile experimentation, constantly changing and trying things. I'll try this, did it fail? Okay, fail fast. That whole concept of try something, does it work? Great, move on, build upon that. And so the architecture that we use needs to fit in with that. And that's, as I say, where the microservices comes in. Now, for those of you who've been around a few years, you'll remember SOA, service-oriented architectures, were the promise of that. But the reality is that their protocols and their interfaces weren't very good. That has all evolved, and that's where microservices deliver on the promise that SOA did, which makes it easier to implement change, to create projects quicker, to deploy stuff faster, to make modifications. And it's not just us saying that. If you look at all of the big, well-known companies who are disrupting and changing, Netflix, they all have adopted these microservice architectures. Facebook, Uber, Airbnb. So they're the proof that the microservices architecture is the way to go. And they're talking about multiple times per day. In fact, I was amazed to see Macquarie, multiple times per day you're deploying stuff. That's fantastic. I mean, that's what comes from having the right architecture. And so if you've now got microservices, you need a lightweight, flexible way to build and package those services, add in the dependencies and deploy them. And you need to do it in a very efficient way and not this overhead heavy way, or else you're just going to increase cost. And that's where containers come in. They give us a way to package up these microservices and deploy them at very, very high densities in our existing infrastructure. If you think about, when virtualization came along for the last 20 years, it completely changed the economics of it. Well, containers is going to do that for the next 20 years. It changes the economics of how much we can pack in to do it. Now, we believe, obviously, because Linux has had containers forever, we believe that RHEL is the way to do it. Why? Because ultimately, a container is an operating system. It's a way of packaging up that to include an operating system. And you want to know that your application, when you build it, is going to run in a consistent, stable way. And in our world, that's RHEL. Because if you're running RHEL in your data center today, you can run RHEL in containers and know it's going to behave exactly the same way. So containers create this consistency. And whether it's an Express app with bundling in all the Node.js sort of dependencies that it has in a container, or a Rails app packaging in all the Apache stuff, or a Java app with JBoss, you build in this container, and then you know that container can run anywhere that RHEL runs. You know how it's going to run, how it's going to perform. Let's talk about process, the second requirement. So we see a move away from the waterfall towards leaner, agile methods. And again, that makes sense. If we're talking about adapting our IT processes to the business, it means we're changing often. We're trying things. We need to get faster at doing it. Now, the good news is we're all exposed to that because we're all exposed to mobile apps. We've gotten used to the idea that, hey, I've got a mobile app on my device. I know it's version 1 now, but version 1.2 or version 2 will come out in 3 months. So we're getting used to the idea of small incremental changes. And that's what Agile gives you, the ability to create small incremental changes as part of the process. The other big change, of course, DevOps, is the idea that we used to have a development department and an operations department, and never the two shall meet. Right? Now we think about, Macquarie talked about spinning up in minutes. Spinning up infrastructure in minutes, and they want to get that down. That's what DevOps does. It removes the barriers and the friction between the development side and the ops side. It combines it so that it's a real self-service. And again, what does that give us? It gives us agility. It gives us speed to move faster. And again, we're matching the IT with the business and what the business wants. The other thing that we're seeing is a rise in what we call citizen developers and the process around that. what's interesting is because there's such a demand from the business side on IT, there's not enough bandwidth and capacity and engineers to do it. So we see the rise of citizen developers, tools and business wanting to do this themselves. It used to be called shadow IT, right? We now just see it as it's citizen developer. They'll download a toolkit and they'll start to use it themselves. So we've got to think about that as a process. How do we integrate that into the environment? A new term that we're seeing in this whole area is the concept of biz DevOps. So it's the concept that not only are we merging and reducing the friction between dev and ops, but we're reducing the friction between biz and development, so that rather than business defines something and dev builds it, we have this ability to actually, the business to be able to develop on their own and develop what they want, right? So it's a new concept, and again, it's all about breaking down the barriers, reducing friction. And as I say, this gives rise to things like citizen developer tools, but also tools like our BPM suite, which allows the business users to change processes on the fly without coding. These are only going to increase these kinds of tools, where we bake into the process the ability for the business to change their mind and experiment and do things. And it's tools like our BPM suite that allow us to do this. And so finally to platforms. You're not going to build a modern application on microservices and use Agile and then deploy it on a big old legacy mainframe, right? You want something that fits the architecture and fits the process. So you want, modern platforms are going to be cloud-based. They're going to be mobile-centric. They're going to have a rich set of middleware services available as services. They're going to be tightly integrated into the application lifecycle. They're going to have continuous integration and deployment. These are the things that characterize modern app development. And I run the business of mobile. So I was, Joe mentioned the CEO of Feed Henry that got acquired into Red Hat. I used to focus on mobile as a business. Now we see mobile as part of modern app dev. It's just one component. If you're building and launching an app, you're going to have a mobile piece, a web piece, a rules piece, a back-end piece. So it's all part of the same thing. So new platforms have to be able to cope with all of this. So the other thing about modern platforms are going to be self-service based, right? So it's going to be, again, the ability for a developer to say, I need this, spin it up, get access to it immediately, regardless of whether it's for the modern stuff or regardless of whether it's modernizing an existing application or workload, right? The ability to self-serve and the ability to choose the language. I may decide to build some apps in Node.js and JavaScript, and I may decide, I need to maintain my Java apps, and Java is a perfectly useful way to modernize some of my apps. So we're going to need to have multilingual. We're going to need the middleware services to be available as services, not as products to install. So they need to be there and available, and I can use them. So I'm going to need a message bus. I'm going to need a login. I'm going to need all of these things available as services. And above all, we're going to need this thing to scale. We're going to need to figure out how does it scale using CI and CD. Now, OpenShift is Red Hat's DevOps platform. OpenShift Container Platform is our version of what a modern app dev platform should be. And it runs everywhere that RHEL runs. It runs on bare metal. It runs on virtualized environments. It runs in the private cloud and the public cloud. Not only is it our DevOps platform, it's also our container and app orchestration platform. It's the same thing. And so we use OpenShift to create, manage, and scale the containers. We've adopted the Docker format container that has come from the open source world. We've been doing containers for years. Red Hat Linux has had Linux containers for a long time. But we saw the community said, hey, this Docker format, that's a pretty useful format. And so we got behind it. And we're one of the biggest, I think the second biggest, but we're certainly one of the biggest contributors to the Docker format open source project. So again, that's an example of we saw what was happening in the community and we embraced it and we helped make it available for the enterprise. We use Kubernetes for orchestration. So Kubernetes is another open source project. It came from Google. It was Google's contribution and give back to the open source. We're the second biggest contributor to the Kubernetes open source. So what we've done is we've taken these great technologies from the open source upstream communities and we've put them together in a product what we call OpenShift, that's available for you to use. And this is what Macquarie were using in their digital banking solution. And this will run in our open hybrid cloud configuration. So it'll run on-premise, on bare metal, in virtualized environments, public cloud and private clouds. And so then what we did was we took all our middleware services, that we have a rich array of middleware services from our EAP solution, our mobile solution, our AMQ messaging. We put them all into OpenShift. So they're all available as containerized products within OpenShift, built on microservices architectures. And so that's how we provide you with a common platform for you to build using all of the things that we have today. So from a developer, how does it work? Well, the developer starts locally on their machine. They download OpenShift Local, and they start building the app on their local machine. They iterate on it, and they tweak it, and they get it going, whether it's a small app or a microservice. It's a self-contained unit. And when they're ready, they create the container, and they move it forward to the next stage. That next stage might be to a test and QA department, where they're going to add in the high availability issues, and they're going to add in the software-defined networking, and they're going to add in storage and put it all together and bring all of the other apps that other people are building all together as a single solution. And they're going to test it. And how are they going to do it? They're going to do it using OpenShift Container Lab, which is the same OpenShift. And when they're ready with that, they push it into production. And it's going to run on OpenShift Container Platform. It's the same OpenShift. So the same OpenShift can be used for the individual developer, for teams of people to collaborate, and it's the same OpenShift that's going to scale up into a cloud scale. And what's great about this is we ship our cloud management solution, CloudForms, we ship that with OpenShift. It comes with it. So we give you not just the ability to scale it and run it, we give the ability to manage it using our CloudForms platform. So with a common standardized platform, the right architecture based upon microservices and containers, using DevOps processes that are embedded and agile methods, we give you a platform that you can move forward at the speed that you want. And you can run it wherever you want to run it. This is how you build an architecture for continuous innovation. This is how you build an architecture that will help you modernize your existing workloads, as well as building out the new workloads. And it's a practical example of what Joe mentioned, which was the idea that we take what's happening in the community. So OpenShift came from the community, the upstream community. And we take those projects and we put them together and we make them safe for you to use in the enterprise. So that's what OpenShift is. It's going to be safe for you to build using containers and scaling using Kubernetes. It's safe for you to use in the enterprise. And as Joe mentioned, he mentioned Feed Henry. I was the CEO and founder of Feed Henry. We were closed source. And the day after we were acquired, our president, Paul Cormier, said, "You're going to open source it." And I was amazed. I was like, you paid all this money and now you're just going to open source the whole thing? But what they believe is that they believe that the power of all of the community and the participation of the community is much greater, and we can innovate much faster by doing this. And that's why they believe in it. That's the commitment to open source. And of course, Joe mentioned our platform vision is based upon the idea of open hybrid cloud. It's the same for containers and microservices. We've enabled it to run on physical, virtual, private, and public. And again, by using RHEL as the common footprint across all of these, if your containers are built using Docker format on RHEL, they'll run on physical, virtual, private, and public the same way. And that's what we do. We provide common environments that you can move workloads across using similar tools. And this common platform allows for common tools to do that, right? So this is why we see Linux and RHEL is so important. So the Linux was the same Linux that helped you standardize and create efficiencies in your operating environment. It's the same RHEL that is the basis of our enterprise virtualization, our REV product. And by having these common tools, we allow you to use the same tools to automate and manage across the different footprints. And so here we like to think that with containers, this is a way for you now to begin the container journey so that we help you build and manage containers right across the different footprints. So this is the stack. So basically, it starts with our infrastructure. These are our products for infrastructure, where, think about this. Think about infrastructures where we run the applications. This is our products that we run stuff on. It's RHEL. It's Atomic Host is our containerized. It's what we do to allow containers to run on RHEL. We have storage. Our OpenStack platform is our private cloud. And our virtualization product. So that's our infrastructure stack. And you can choose one or more of those products. You don't have to. We've always been open to products interacting with other products. So these are all the products we have with the infrastructure layer. On top of that, we put OpenShift as our container platform. On top of that, then we have our middleware and application services. And they're JBoss, as you're probably well aware. Virtualization, Fuse is our integration product, our mobile platform runs here. We run those then on top of the container platform. So if you think about infrastructure and application development, the third leg of the stool is management. And we have a complete suite of management tools to help you right across this hybrid cloud footprint. CloudForms on the left is our cloud management product that allows you to manage across hybrid clouds, public and private, to do self-service, policies, and so on and so forth. So that's our main sort of cloud management product. Ansible is one of our recent acquisitions. It's just on fire at the moment. Everybody's using Ansible. We see a great demand for Ansible. Why? Because Ansible, it's all about automation, by the way. So it's an automation product, but it allows everybody to get into the automation game. It uses natural language to actually allow people to create automation playbooks. So we're democratizing the whole concept of how you automate in your business. And everybody knows the value of automation. Insights is it's a SaaS-based service that we provide that takes all of our million implementations of RHEL and all of our use cases, and it allows us to apply big data and science and to help you understand what your systems are going to do and how they're going to perform, if this and this situation occurs. So it provides you insights, and we can tell you things that's going to happen to your system based upon our experience of millions of implementations of it. A very useful thing. And they're now going to use it to create automatic playbooks to help resolve some of those things. So very, very exciting there. And Satellite is our oldest product. It's our systems management product to manage the right environment, standardized operating environments, and so on. So we have a whole suite of management products. So, the future, what does it look like? For 15 years, we've been bringing RHEL to the enterprise. We've been making open source software safe to use in the enterprise. For 10 years, we've been bringing you developer products with our acquisition of JBoss over 10 years ago. So we've been bringing you developers products. So we believe we have the credibility to help you on the infrastructure side and on the development side. And we continue to innovate. These are our latest products. So Cloud Suite helps you integrate private and public clouds with unified management, with the same management across it. That's our Cloud Suite. Innovation Labs is a service we offer to help your developers get the most out of open source. And 3Scale is our most recent acquisition in the middleware layer, which is all about API management, helping you expose APIs and build an API infrastructure. So if you just think of this, if this is where innovation is happening for the future, and Joe talked about it and Max talked about it, this is where innovation is happening. Everything's happening in the open source world through the power of participation. So if this is where you're going to innovate, we think this is the stack that you need to make it safe to use in the enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.